without doubts, I think it's by far the best league in the world.
How dare you score like that in the Premier League? Mission accomplished in the Premier League. The American.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of ASTV's EPL show, match week number 9. We were not here based on some scheduling and technical difficulties. And by technical, I mean I resigned from my job and kind of forgot what day of the week it was because I hadn't done that in 20 plus years. And then we just realized we had to record the Monday night podcast, and there was just no way either of us were going to do it afterwards. So we took the week off. Good for us. The refereeing decisions, talking points around the Premier League, and big matches and storylines did not take the week off in match week 9. So before we get to those, as we always do, welcome in Paul Bickler, my co-host. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. It's a gray and sort of rainy Monday here, so it is good to be off the clock and doing something I would rather be doing than working.
There you go. Gray and rainy is never a good sign. Probably means it fits in with those guys down at Stockley Park. Because I'd say they, like, if there was ever a whole room of people that probably wanted to, like, that could star in the next, like, Snickers commercial. You know, they used to have those NFL commercials with the want to get away when the guy would make, like, the terrible call, and then he would just eating a Snickers. Like, I feel like if they had a camera on Michael Oliver about a half hour after the match, he probably would have been having a wanna get away moment.
Yeah, there was some rough ones this week for sure. But Oliver, I think Coot obviously didn't bathe himself in any glory either. But
yeah, we'll get to that one. I think that's the biggest one. So why don't we start our as we do each and every week here on this program, we do a VAR match weekend review. I think this week's could have probably been an entire program. Last week had quite a few as well. So we're going to go quick hitting, especially if we agree on them, which I'm going to go out on a limb and think we're going to agree on most of these because I don't think there was anything too glaring. But let's start with the biggest match of the weekend, Liverpool versus Arsenal. There was a brief red card review against Virgil van Dijk early in the match against Kai Havertz, basically for kicking back at him, getting him with his studs on his ankle, similar to about what Beckham did to get sent off in that World Cup famously. Paul, do you think this was to make sure they took a look at it, or do you think this was brushed away completely because the game has changed and that is no longer a red card where maybe it was even 5 or 10 years ago in this game?
I think it's changed in the fact that anything below the jawline is looked at completely differently. But I think sort of this neck region up, you can't get away with that anymore. But I think anything below that, I think they're letting that stuff go now, unless it's egregious or there's some sort of force behind it.
Yeah, I for me, it's not a red card because it's not violent. He's lucky that the ref doesn't see it and think it's a petulant act of violence and just sends him off for it, just to in the old Lazar Markovic finger flick to the cheek. But that was a European game and not a Premier League game, and I think that always weighs into it because there are a lot of these calls we'll talk about this weekend. I think if they were happening in a European competition, it may be a different story, both from the on-field decision and what the VAR might do. I will say it is petulant, though. And as a Liverpool supporter, and we'll talk more about this, I think, in the Monday night podcast that we do, I don't like the look from my club captain 6 minutes into what is the biggest game, even giving a chance. Why even, it just seems silly to me and almost beneath him. And it almost felt like he knew they were in for a fight and wanted to get under their skin a little bit. And to me, that's not calm as you like, as the song may say.
No, I agree with that. I mean, definitely not the look you want there from Verge as your captain. Yeah, I can't disagree with anything there.
So let's move over to the other side of the center back defense for Liverpool. There was a penalty claim and a review for the Konate foul or potential foul on Martinelli in the box. It kind of had Trent involved as well. And I think that's what kind of, to me, made it look initially like it might be clumsy and there might be something in it. When you first saw it live time, were you worried that with Anthony Taylor of all people on the pitch, that there was not going to be a problem to point to the spot in that instance?
Look, I'm worried anytime somebody goes down in the box against Liverpool or any team that I'm rooting for in this day and age, right? So, like, yeah, for sure, definitely worried there. I think at the end of the day, though, when you look at this thing, like once you slow it down and like once you really look at this, I think at the end of the day, Kanadi wins the ball first and is coming at an angle where he's not endangering the player. I think the rest is sort of incidental contact that comes when there's two, opposing forces coming together at that speed.
Yeah, I felt like it was actually the proper use of VAR because I think they look at the situation, they see that he gets the ball first, they understand that there's not a reckless play or a challenge that could put the player in danger, and he doesn't come through the player even though he gets the ball. He literally comes from the side. He kind of comes down a little bit. It's awkward. I think Trent being there almost made you question, like, does Trent hit him? Is there another form of contact there?
Yeah.
Which there clearly isn't. And I just think it's the right way to quickly look at something, clear it, and move it on. And it was, a brilliant day overall, in my opinion, by Konate. And this was just one more instance of him really covering for Trent throughout the match and protecting him for the fact that he easily could have been lit up for a couple, but we'll get deeper into that. Obviously, a talking point we've seen a lot of are these denial of goal scoring opportunity. You had the one against Evanilson for Saliba. He gets sent off after a VAR review. You have the one last week where Jota gets taken down and subsequently injured against Chelsea. It's just a yellow card. We kind of agreed, I think, to the difference between them. And then we fast forward to this week, and you have Crystal Palace versus Tottenham, and Ismail Sarr basically gets played in. We all know Van de Veen is an extremely fast human, but that can't come into play when you talk about he was the last defender who takes the player down. I've seen a lot of different opinions on this one. Did you have a chance to see it? And do you think Van de Veen was lucky? On-field decision has to stand? Or are we getting back into that inconsistent use of the same rules?
So I don't know if it's inconsistent use of the same rules. What I think the problem is that when you try to legislate this game into oblivion, the problem is like no matter what you do in this game, there are going to be situations that are subjective, right? And to me, the biggest subjective, like the biggest call that like is going to have the most subjectivity to it is one of these where you're trying to take multiple things into consideration, the pace of play, the direction of play, and then you're basically making a judgment call based on what you see, the positioning of those players on the field, and the players involved. Because for this one, like they're going to use, I've seen the fact that they're using the direction of play as the reason that this wasn't a straight red. And to me, that's really subjective based on the ability of the attacking player involved, right? Like, I think to me, regardless of the direction of this play, you can't tell me it's not a clear goal scoring opportunity. So, did they get it right in application? Probably, because I don't think there's anything here you can really overturn this on for clear and obvious. But the problem is, it's just so subjective. To me, I think Van de Ven's extremely lucky here.
Yeah, I felt like he was very lucky boy, and he got saved by the fact that it was called a yellow on the field. And if it was called a red on the field, there's no going back from it. Like it, and to that alone, is why I hate this use of VAR in this way, because I do feel in some ways if we need these officials to make that call on the field. And I think too often they're able to hide behind um, having VAR there in similar ways to how NBA officials now do late in games and you know MLB officials. I think all sports, once you institute instant replay of any kind, it makes the decision making process for on field officials that much easier to hide around an excuse. So um, let's go over to the Chelsea Newcastle match. Interesting match. I have a feeling we'll talk a little bit more about this match as well as Chelsea as the show goes on. Um, in Nkunku's dive, I mean, the penalty that Nkunku wins in the box against Dan Burn. Um, it's awarded on the field and quickly, and in my opinion, rightly removed by VAR. My question for you is: one, did you agree with the decision to disallow that penalty? And two, if VAR has to get involved and it's a situation like that, should it not be an automatic yellow for a simulation, or at least some form of like repercussion? Because to me, there wasn't enough contact for him to go down, and he acted like it was a penalty, two arms flailing, rolling on his stomach. That should be a card in retrospect for me.
Yes and yes, because I don't think that we can have, half of our show every week be about refereeing and talk about how the state of the game needs to improve overall and the state of refereeing needs to improve overall if we're not discouraging these types of things that make refereeing substantially harder, right? And I think this is the number one thing that makes it very, very tough for a lot of referees is the idea of simulation in the game is literally high reward, low risk. There is no there's very, very little chance that you're going to get a straight yellow diving in this game anymore unless it's so blatantly obvious you shouldn't be doing it anyway because you're not good at it. I think, and that's the problem is there's no incentive for this to go out of the game, and it only makes the refereeing more difficult.
Yeah, and I think one of the players for Newcastle got a yellow card basically for dissent for the penalty. And all he said to the ref was, you have to look at it. We didn't touch him. There's no way it's a foul. And he gave him a yellow card for dissent. And then when it's proven that he was right, they don't take that yellow card away. And the league says, well, that was for his conduct towards the match official, and therefore it can't be rescinded. Yeah. So, this is just where they hide behind all of this. And then you look at the Bournemouth match where Semenyo gets a yellow card for a dive on the field, and then it goes to a 4.5-minute review where some believe that there's absolutely contact, but they don't take the yellow away from him for the dive, even though they acknowledge there was contact, but not enough to award a penalty. This is how twisted I think these officials get. Also in that Villa game gave us the always awkward 8.5-minute review to figure out if a ball was out of bounds or not, which I think is never possible to tell by any angle. At what point will they either change the rule about how far a ball has to be out to be in or out ball, or will they put microchips in all balls and get, basically goal line technology around the pitch? Because it feels to me like these ones on the touchline occasionally are called right, and the ones on the sidelines are never correct. And I think you could make an argument why is VAR able to get involved if they don't know they have it right fully with cameras?
Yeah, I mean, and not to introduce logic into this, but logic would dictate if you don't have a camera angle that covers all angles and you can't get that call based on the video evidence correct, then you should probably have some sort of ball technology inside of it that does, right? I mean, that's makes the most logical sense to me. Because the thing that I don't like about that is they're like, oh, you can see daylight between the edge and the ball, but it's that doesn't fucking matter. It's where the side of that ball is. If it's over the line and you're looking at it at an angle, you could still see green paint through it, but that ball could still technically be touching based on the shape of it. And that's I think we've committed to getting granular about getting these calls right, and we've got away from the subjective nature of calling football and the subjectivity of it. We've tried to get this thing granular. If you're going to get it granular, you can't you have to consistently do that across the board. You can't just pick calls that you're like, well, this is as good as we could get, because it's not.
So let's jump to the Man United, probably the biggest call of the entire week. I know there were other calls in the Villa match, and there was the penalty for Brentford that they got, which is just a nightmare for the ref because it's clearly a foul. It's clearly a foul in the box, and he just calls it outside the box, and then he has to get corrected by. That's got to be the worst feeling, but good job by them for getting it right. So, where do you put the most amount of blame in this Man United West Ham situation? Is in your mind, is it on Michael Oliver for genuinely misusing VAR? Like what could lead to it? Because to me, it's a baffling one. I wasn't watching it live. I had to follow up with it after. And when I saw it, I genuinely couldn't believe what I just witnessed.
Yeah. If we're playing the blame pie, I'm probably going 60-40 Michael Oliver, okay? Just because I think it's like I want to make it 80-20 Michael Oliver, but the fact of the matter is I can't handicap my blame pie for David Coote just because he's fucking a liability. You know what I mean? The fact of the matter is he's got to wear his big boy pants when he's a head ref, and he's got to make decisions based on what he truly believes he's seeing. And in that case, you can't tell me he went to the monitor and changed that call based on conviction. He changed it on why he thought they brought him to the monitor.
That's exactly where my issue was with it. I actually wrote down that, I don't think there was ever enough to send him to the monitor. I don't even think there was enough to get involved. I think he should be reprimanded for the application of VAR. Then if you're going to apply VAR, I don't think there's actually a clear and obvious error in it. And I don't think that based on the Premier League rules, it was enough to warrant that coming over. I made the comment earlier about Europe compared to England. You could see that type of a foul under the lower half of the shin get given in Europe. And, that's very normal, maybe even in Spain. But I just feel like when you go to the monitor, and I know we give Anthony Taylor a lot of shit, rightfully so, but I'm pretty sure that in the entire time that VAR has been in the Premier League, only 4 times has a match official went to the monitor and came back and kept the call they called on the field after being sent to the monitor. And I think it's 2 or 3 times it's Anthony Taylor. Now, that might be because he's just the only prick enough to tell all of his freaking compatriots and coworkers, go bleep yourself, stop sending me to the fucking monitor if you don't want me to embarrass you. But I also think he does have some conviction with what he's calling on the field. Whether I agree with the calls, how I like his tactics on the pitch, or I think he's a great official, I at least give him credit for standing his own conviction. David Coote in that spot has to just get in his earpiece and tell Michael Oliver, I saw the exact same thing I saw on the field. There's no way I'm doing this. There's no way I'm giving a penalty here.
And I think at the end of the day, these guys have to be on the same page of what is the purpose of the monitor? Is the purpose of a monitor to get a second look on a 50-50, or is it to talk about, or are you calling the monitor because there's a clear and obvious error, essentially, right? And that really just defines the VAR intervention. Are we intervening? Are we intervening in the best interest of the game to give referees a better look at a play that was bang, bang, 50-50? Or are we just really using this for clear and obvious errors? And then, because to me, then we get to the point where why are we even calling over the monitor if that's what we're using it for? Because we're just putting these referees in a spot where there's more controversy.
Well, speaking of controversy, that decision directly led to Jared Bowen's, 90-minute +2 stoppage time penalty winner, and in turn led to Erik ten Hag finally out at Manchester United. So news came out this morning. It started to trickle out late last night that it would probably be happening. Um, I'm not sure who's more relieved this morning once the news actually happened, whether it's Erik ten Hag, it's the hierarchy at Manchester United, or it's the players in that dressing room. Because I do think they actually did like Ten Hag at times, and I think they've actually played for him at times, at least a fraction of them. Um, we've talked a lot on this program, podcasts, in Discord, and just, well, because it's fun to make fun of them. We've talked a lot about Erik ten Hag and his time at United. So let's not focus on the faults and the failures. Let's look quickly here, Paul. Let's talk a little bit about the options out there to replace them. And I'll give you a name. We'll talk quickly on it. Give me an idea. Do you think they're a possibility? They'd be a good fit, a bad fit? So the first one is obviously the guy who's in charge as of this morning, took over training today, Ruud van Nistelrooy. There as an assistant, named interim manager, but I thought it was interesting that they made it very clear, by all accounts, he has no chance for the long-term positions of the job, and they plan to hire someone within the next month for the full-time job. Like, they're not going to give him the caretaker role till the end of the year. Do you think they will actually be able to hire someone in the next month, employed or unemployed? And is this purely them saying we're not going to allow these dogs of players to go on a 6-match winning streak like they did under Ole, and we give this asshole a 3-year deal at the end of the year after he wins the Europa League?
I mean, usually when owners and clubs come out and make statements like this, that means there's been some pretty heavy discussions. They've actually made progress and solidified some things in the background. So my assumption is that there's somebody that is pretty much just got to put pen to paper, that all the agreements and a lot of those things has been flushed out. But again, we're talking about Manchester United, who has a horrible track record of proactively planning anything from a business standpoint. So it's going to be interesting. My thing is, like, we talked about this, is like when you look at the managerial landscape, you have dinosaurs and you have recycled sort of like specialists, but you don't have any of these like sort of career managers who go club to club at that high level, like you used to see the Eriksons and like some of these past manager greats. I mean, Mourinho's kind of in his last years, right? But like in terms of like a lot of these guys that you saw just kind of rotating through the top clubs, there's fewer and fewer of those guys. So like I don't really know what their next best bet is out there. Are you gonna gamble it on some unknown, like from another league, or are you gonna go like I just don't know who's out there for them. That makes sense.
So let's look at the 3 big names that surface that are English that everyone's talked about. Graham Potter, Thomas Frank, Kieran McKenna. I think they all have reasons that make sense. Graham Potter's available right away. He's known for working with young players. United does have a good core group of young players, especially in Garnacho and some of the players they bought. Obviously, Diallo. There's a few of those players there. But I think Graham Potter wants more of a guarantee and a longer project, and I just don't see him getting that at United. Plus, how can they forget how bad those press conferences were when he was Chelsea manager and just looked like a guy with a deer in the headlights?
And that's the thing. I just think they've got too much pride to go for somebody who's failed at another big Premier League club that recent.
So, speaking of a guy not failing, if anything, maybe overachieving at his time and loved by the club that he's at, gets rumored with every big job, never seems to get even a sniff at the job. Is this the time that Thomas Frank has to say, thank you, Brentford? I appreciated our Danish connection, but if Manchester United comes calling, I got to take this phone call?
I don't know, man. Like, is the Danish national team better than Manchester United right now? Like, because, like, I mean, I just don't know how. I don't know how Frank goes into that side with that many issues outside of. There's so many variables that will be uncomfortable to him, whether it be Manchester, whether it be a big club, whether it be in not having 9 Danish nationals in a 16-team side. Like, there's just a lot of variables. Like, I don't know. It's. I think that this job is not as attractive as a lot of people think it is for outside managers. And I think that the club has too much pride to gamble on an unknown or a mid-team manager. Like, I don't know if they would even think that like Frank would be like a guy that they'd want to go snag. I mean, I would if I were them. I think it makes sense.
Well, someone they were, you're teeing us up here, someone that is at a lower club that was on their radar supposedly over the summer, but then signed a 4-year deal, is Kieran McKenna, former number 2 or youth team coach there and assistant coach, I think, under Ole or Jose, one of them. He was very well respected by the players, well respected by management, including the new owners and Enos and Sir Jim Radcliffe. But he signed a 4-year deal this summer. Ipswich hasn't exactly been pulling up trees as they come into the Premier League, struggling a bit, but still playing that great brand of football. He's only had one coaching job, but it's been an amazing one, taking a team in 18 months, 2 divisions up and into the Premier League. And at times even looking like a Premier League side, competing on a Premier League Saturday or Sunday. So would that be the type of hire United should be looking to make, Paul? Not the type of hire they will make. Should they be looking for a guy like McKenna that actually gets it, understands United, knows what it's like to be in the building and maybe even win something, and could give them the stability for the longer term project? Like, is that what they should be looking for? I'm not asking if you think they'll hire him or not. Is that the type of guy you think they should be hiring if they're not hiring a Frank or a Pop?
Spending 10 minutes on this, saying like how I didn't think these guys at the mid-table were good fits. This one makes sense to me, though. Like, this one makes sense. This, to me, is the best fit of all of them, because I think when you are a great club, you want to take somebody that's been from within your organization and you want to have them be a part of reinstalling that culture of when you were great, right? And like, I think the fact that he's been through that youth setup and seen that from the inside out under some great managers is probably pretty important. If I'm United and there's not a legendary manager that can step in with a huge personality and make the team his personality in the way a Jose or a Jurgen would be able to do, like, to me, it almost makes sense that you flip this side, you keep the core that's young, which is great, between Diallo and Garnacha and all these younger cats coming through. Manu, all those guys. Like, that makes sense to me. Like, that you would have a younger, lesser known manager that has tons of promise, that's very, very well familiar with your club and your culture. It makes sense. So much so that they probably won't do it.
They probably won't even consider it. And to be honest, for all we know, McKenna will be out of work and might be available by then. Because if Ipswich's results keep going the way they are, I'm not sure he'll be able to hang on too much longer. So if we look across Europe, the hot rumor, of course, is that Ruben Amorim might be the guy that, like you're talking about, the one that coyly is already in communication with them. Now, I find it funny that every time a job opens in the Premier League, somehow Ruben Amorim is having negotiations around getting the job, yet no team has ever admitted that they offered him a contract or even talked to him yet. So until I see him like on the radar of a Premier League team, I'm just going to say that his PR people are extremely good at linking him to jobs, because everything I read is that he's one of the like short list to potentially replace Pep should he step down at the end of the season, which is the big rumor that everyone believes will happen. So I'll ask you this. If you were Amorim, would you take the money and run if United comes calling? He's, a hot commodity under the age of 40. just retired, I think 5 years ago from playing. Seems a really good up and coming candidate, but hasn't done it outside of the Portuguese league. Like, would you take that United job? Would you hold out and see if maybe the City job comes available, or there's a better job for you in Spain? He seems almost too hot a young candidate to be the next guy at Man United. But then again, that's what people said about Ten Hag.
I think for him and his position, I would take a job like Manchester United if it was offered to me. Like versus holding out for City, like that. First of all, that's not guaranteed. You don't like, and I think there's enough volatility around what's happening with City that you don't have any guarantees, right? Like, so for me,
Yeah.
I would definitely do that. And if you don't get United, I mean, there's plenty of big jobs that are going to open up across Spain and Italy that are going to be big clubs and decent climates.
The other European managers being bandied about, Edin Terzic at Dortmund, Simone Inzaghi at Inter, former Barcelona manager Xavi, of course Zidane, who's never going to United, and the one that would scare me the most if they got him, which is German national team manager Julian Nagelsmann, because I think he's one of the really great, like, actual coaches, like tactical coaches, and makes players better and teams better when he's given a chance. Any of those names jump out at you? Do you think United has the pulling power to get someone like Nagelsmann to seriously consider walking away from that German national team?
No, I don't. Like, I actually think that Nagelsmann's kind of built for international football in a weird way. Like, I feel like that there's not very managers that are, but I feel like he is because he's such a football mind and he's so driven at like the tactics and then the pieces that are fitting into those tactics that like I almost think that it's like he almost overshoots the politics of international football and is really good at just like dealing with like, hey, I've got 50 of the best, make them work. Like he's the guy you want doing that, right? And I don't know if that works as well. Like I don't know if he's like necessarily an empire builder in terms of like building a culture and growing a team, like in the way that you would need somebody like Jurgen to do that at that club like United. There's nobody that you name that I like over the moon about that United getting or necessarily scares me. So yeah, like this is where we keep coming back to. Like we went through this list of names. We talked about the one that made sense, probably not happening. So like for me, it's like one of these things where like I could see them going into next year with Van Nistelrooy. No matter what they say about that not being the case, I could see that.
I think if they go into January without a manager in place, I think their supporters are going to lose their mind because they're just going to feel like they're an absolute stuck. And I do think that if these owners do that, they're going to show that they are truly a little over their head right now, and they may be a little bit inept as well. Because I think that if you wait to fire him till now and you don't have the guy, then what are you really doing? Like firing him makes even less sense unless you really think you have the guy. I don't care how bad it got. I mean, let's be honest. If they don't call a terrible penalty yesterday, he probably doesn't get fired for the 1-1 draw. And that to me just shows that they may just be completely out to lunch. But we got a segment here. We do stock up, stock down. We kind of give some players, coaches, referees, supporters, groups, whoever you want it to be. If you were investing in that said person, would you be buying their stock? Would you be selling their stock? So, Paul, we'll start with you on this one. Give me someone that came out of this week in your mind, or a team, whatever, that you felt their stock is up, and why.
So I'll tell you whose team came out of here stock up the most, and it's top of the table, so it doesn't really do a whole lot of good to like invest in it. But I think when it needs to be mentioned that as quietly average as City has been, they sit at top of the table. They haven't lost this year, and we keep talking about how beatable they look. Yet they keep pulling it out. So for me, that's my team. For my players, I'm going to go co-players. I'm going Chris Wood and Danny Welbeck, two strikers that are having career years. Welbeck is almost halfway to his best tally ever, and we're 8 weeks in. He's at a ripe old age of 34, something like that. He's going to better his tally of when he was 20 at United, which is insane. Chris Wood keeps scoring, and it ain't pretty in typical Chris Wood fashion. But for me, this Forest side has quietly been really, really good defensively, which is something I didn't think we'd say in the next 5-6 years with the way that they play. But on the flip side of that, Chris Wood just keeps scoring, and that combination of them not leaking goals and him finding a way every week, if they can ride that, they're going to stay at the top of this table in a very surprising manner.
Yeah, I'm with you on Chris Wood. I'll come up with another one. He was on my stock up list as well. And the only thing I would disagree with you on is the headed goal is like a goofy Chris Wood runs onto the ball, heads it over the line type thing. The turn and swivel into the bottom corner is actually a beautiful goal. In ridiculous fashion. And I will say Chris Wood has proven the doubters wrong. People forget he was good enough to get Leicester promoted, just good enough for them to sell him that season because they felt he was still a championship caliber striker. He got them promoted and they sold him as reward, never let him have a game. He got loaned out 4 times. He was at Newcastle and they laughed at him and kind of booed him off. He's been all over the place. And he really found a home. And, Newcastle basically pawned him off. And when he ended up at Forest, I think we all kind of laughed at it and was like, oh, yeah, this is like them that's signing 18 different fullbacks. Now they're going to sign 6 different versions of Taiawoni. And, Chris Wood's never going to play. And because of it, the kid doesn't get on the pitch. And it's rightfully so. I mean, the fact that he's got, is it 8 goals, I think, in the Premier League. But my stock up is the only guy in the Premier League other than Erling Haaland that has more goals than Chris Wood, which is Brian Mbeumo. And I think there are a lot of people that believe that Brian Mbeumo was a product of Ivan Toney, a product of that Brentford system. Brian Mbeumo is a class footballer who I believe could play in every side. I'm not saying he starts in every side, but he can play in every side. He could absolutely do the job at Liverpool or Manchester City playing on the right wing. He plays off a striker. He can play a false 9. He can score from anywhere on the pitch. And he is sneakily quick. He's not fast, but he's super quick. And I absolutely love his first touch. And I'm not sure I'd want the ball to fall to any other player if he were in my side right now in the whole entire league. And that might even include Mo Salah, Haaland, outside of Cole Palmer, which is where my stock up of my team goes. And it has a lot to do with Cole Palmer. But my stock up this week is going to go to Chelsea Football Club, and it really goes to Enzo Maresca. And I owe Enzo Maresca a big apology. I thought it was kind of shameful how he was airing things out in the public and the way he was treating, the likes of Ben Chilwell and Raheem Sterling and some of the other players at Chelsea. In the long run, I genuinely think the guy's just like Pep. He comes cut from that cloth. He's ruthless. He knew he only had such a short period of time, and he had a vision, and he had the players he wanted to do it with. And they look like a pretty deep squad who's starting to figure things out. And at least at Stamford Bridge, Cole Palmer is an absolute world-class player who basically can't be stopped. I know he had his goal chalked off, but his ball, that pass he makes to Neto to set up the Nicholas Jackson goal is a ball that 5 or 6 players in the whole world can make, and one of them is Messi. And the other one might be Messi thinking about whether or not he'd make that pass. It's such class, and it's big ups to Chelsea. I got to give him credit. Big ups to Enzo Maresca. And Cole Palmer probably is the Premier League player of the year, even though he doesn't have the goals or assists to go for it. And if they're anywhere near the title race by the end of the year, we might have to question whether or not Cole Palmer's the type of guy who might get himself a Ballon d'Or. So I'll take this second here to just say I have a bonus, and I am going to say my miscellaneous stock up is to the fucking Ballon d'Or voters. Nice job given but at least you finally gave it to someone who wasn't 850 years old and is super talented and is a team player. And I may hate Manchester City and Spain, and I really do dislike both of those sides. But the best player in both of them for the last 12 months was Rodri. He's the most important player in domestic or international football, and they finally got it right. So really good on them. So give me a stock down.
My stock down. Yeah, my stock down is Newcastle. Winless in 5. They're getting some players back, but they've had some injuries. But this is a side that's been around long enough. They're well funded. They've cleaned up shop. Like, this is a squad that should be able to figure out and be deep enough to sustain these injuries. They've regressed in all the really key areas that made them special in the years past. And I think it's a team that doesn't look like they have a whole lot of identity right now.
I love that shout. My stock down, maybe the only team playing a little worse, or maybe not as bad as Newcastle, but just as inconsistent. My stock down is Tottenham Hotspur, specifically Ange Postecoglou. And I like Ange, okay? I think Ange is a guy, and I heard Goldbridge talking about it on the United Stand, saying he wouldn't be upset if they were like rumored to trying to hire Ange if they thought he was the guy, because he's seen footballing principles that makes him think he could make sense as a manager. It's not working at Spurs, though. And his inability to deviate from his first plan. And we just spent 9 years watching a great manager who had accomplished a hell of a lot more with better players, by the way, not be able to get out of his own way when things weren't working in his own way. So I just feel like, to steal a Yogi Berra line and before the Dodgers play the Yankees in Game 3 of the World Series tonight, it could be getting late quick. That could be coming quick for Ange, in my opinion. And I hope that's not the case, because I know Spurs fans really want him to succeed. Do you have another stock down? Do you have a player? Do you have someone else that you had in mind for your stock down? Another team?
What? I didn't have a player. I just wanted to say my Newcastle piece. But I think next week I'll get back on the player horse and start dragging somebody down into that gutter with me.
Yeah, so I'm sure I'm probably going to bring this up again in the next hour. But my miscellaneous would have been Kylian Mbappe, because that stock down was just the easiest stock down of all time. Because if you break records like most times offsides in a La Liga match, and you do that shit in your first Classico at home when you get drubbed and a 17-year-old kid scores goals, like, oh man. And if you don't think every neutral in the fan isn't doing chef's kiss every time you fall on your face, Kylian, oh boy. I'm actually rooting for PSG to win the lawsuit against him for his bonus. So I'm basically rooting for oil money to stay in the pockets of heathens rather than give it to a footballer who probably has it earned. But my stock down is to Andy Robertson, and I guess I gotta be real. We've been saying it for a while. It looks like the beginning of the end, or at least a decline, is coming. He was at fault for the Saka goal, both in his footwork and his coverage. He played the first ball on sides that led to the Saka goal by dropping back. Consistently, in my opinion, he didn't seem up to the speed. He had no final ball. Obviously you have bad days at the office. He had a really, really rough day at the office, to the point where I was one who was actually excited when Tsimikas came in. And within like 3 minutes of the match, he had a positive impact on going forward. And you notice, like, when Robertson isn't doing that at this point, that level of him isn't that red ass defender who can run up and down the pitch and make things happen. And, I was critical of Diaz, and when I rewatched the match and kind of played back some of the highlights, I realized that some of Diaz's where Diaz looked poor was Robertson just giving him terrible balls and bad passes and bad decisions. And you don't get used to seeing that from Andy Robertson. And I hope I'm wrong and he rebounds back, but I do feel like there's going to probably have to be some rotation at that position over the next few weeks and months. And at some point this year, I won't be shocked if he's not first choice.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're honest about it, that's been about an 18-month decline. It's just been a slow death. But that, I think yesterday was the real like sort of wake up call that like, because when you see Andy Robertson against another star, right?
That's it.
And you see the gap, you're like, oh damn, like that it's been a fall far and we've just been a slow burn and not really realized it.
Yeah, and we'll get to that. And that was really what my disappointment with Diaz was he didn't look like a star playing against a rapist. I mean, a midfielder playing fullback, alleged. So what's not alleged is that you should get over and subscribe right now to the YouTube channel. So if you haven't, hit all the like buttons, do the subscription thing, help us out. It goes a long, long way. If you want to get involved with the content, please feel free to send us a message. For all of us here at ASTV, thank you for watching. Have a great week, and we will be back next week with another Premier League show.